So other cultural variables you can see in this slide talk about how we think about gender, how we think about ethnicity, orientation, age, or ability. Let me move to ethnicity and talk about that. I have a friend who works here at Notre Dame, and we got to talking about how our families got to the United States. And I said, well, my great-grandfather came over from County Tipperary, Ireland. He grew up in a village called Bruff, a bit west and south of City Tipperary. He came to this country, worked on a potato farm in New York for a while, wrote home and said that it was no better than the life he had. And this was in the 1860s. He moved on to Chicago, 1871. The city promptly burned down. He moved on west to Montana with the railroad and brought all of his, when he cashed out, brought all of his family over and homesteaded in Wilsall, Montana. It's a great story, and Montana is heavily Irish to this day. I asked my friend, where did your family come from? And she said, after a brief pause, well, pretty much everywhere. I'm part Hawaiian, I'm part African, but it's African out of the Caribbean. I'm part Asian. And of course, you know, we've got a little North American, European white folk rolled in there. And I said, which box do you check on the census? She said, multi-ethnic. And I said, good, that's really interesting. And I offered her an example of how the appearance of Betty Crocker, a fictional character used to pitch packaged foods, has changed over the years. She looked pretty much like a Northern European white woman 50 years ago, and she's got a kind of Tiger Woods Cablinasian look going on now. It's very much, there's Hispanic, there are some Asian elements in the eyes and cheekbones. And the reason that the brand managers have done that is that the ethnic makeup of our own society has changed in that time, and they want the product to reflect that. I think that's an interesting way. They're not leading the parade, they're following it, but they're following it very carefully. So the question as you communicate with others is, to what extent do those issues depicted on the screen, gender, ethnicity, orientation, age, or ability, to what extent do those define the people you're dealing with? How important are they? How central are they to their own self-image? And as you figure that out, it will be easier to communicate with them. Now, there are some dimensions to culture, and I don't want to go deeply into these. I will touch lightly on one called context, because this is particularly important for communication. Context really refers to how we learn things, how we pick things up. And when I worked in the embassy and at Camp Zama in Japan, one of the things I figured out pretty quickly is that this is a high context society. So if you're in a business meeting, what do you need to know? What time of day is it? What time of the year is it? Who's in the room? Is the highest ranking individual in the organization here? Is he about to arrive? It was always a he in those days. What kind of food is out? Is this the expensive tea? Have they put an elaborate fruit display out? Have they put out flowers? If the answer is no to those things, we're not going to get a contract today. It's not going to happen. Is this your first trip or your fifth, right? Because you don't get a contract on the first, second, third, or fourth trip. Really, it's trip number 5 where they may agree to a contract. And all of that not communicated verbally. That was all context. They used to say to me, in the politest terms, Rocha-san, you seem to believe that you must explain everything. And then a pause. I get it. Stop talking. I would pause momentarily and say, well, yes, but there's more, right? That's how Americans are raised. They are raised to believe that context isn't enough, that in a low-context society, it's verbiage that fills the gap. In a high-context society, you take your cues from time, who's in the room, all of the key issues you would pick up on if you knew what to look for. So that's the issue in context. What should I look for? How should I interpret it? And what does it mean ultimately?